Every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m., Emily Foster stopped by the ivy-covered brick house at the corner of Pine and Willow Street. The windows were cracked, the roof sagged, and the mailbox leaned forward as if exhausted by time. Inside lived Mr. Harold Whitaker, 87 years old, a retired furniture maker, and, for the last 2 years, the closest thing Emily had to family. She had met him by accident. One winter morning, she noticed the old man's lights hadn't been on for 2 days. Worried, she knocked on his door and found him shivering under 3 thin blankets, too weak to get up. She brought him soup that night, and the next, and by the end of the week, she was visiting daily. At first, Mr. Whitaker resisted. "I don't need a nurse," he'd grumble, voice raspy from disuse. "I'm not a nurse," Emily would reply with a smile. "Just someone who can cook better than you." He'd roll his eyes but let her stay. Over time, their friendship settled into a rhythm. She'd bring groceries, fix meals, and make sure he took his medicine. He'd tell stories about his youth, about the furniture company he built from scratch, the workers he treated like family, and his late wife, Clara, who had died too young. He kept her picture on the mantel, a black and white photo of a woman with soft eyes and a gentle smile. Once, Emily asked if he ever thought of remarrying. He shook his head slowly. "When you find your person," he said, "everyone else just looks like a stranger." Emily liked that answer. She understood loss too. Her mother had died 2 years earlier, and her father had left long before that. Helping Harold filled a quiet space in her heart that she didn't like to name. They grew close. He started calling her, "Kiddo." She called him, Mr. W. Sometimes she'd bring crossword puzzles or old jazz records. Other times, they'd sit in silence, listening to the rain tap on the window. Then, one cold Friday morning, everything changed. Emily arrived as usual, humming softly as she unlocked the door with the spare key Harold had given her. But when she stepped inside, the house was silent. The old armchair by the window, usually occupied by Harold reading the paper, was empty. Panic pricked at her chest. She searched the house until she found a handwritten note on the kitchen table. "Greater than at the hospital. Don't worry. Back soon." Her heart sank. She rushed to St. Mary's Medical Center and found him in room 304, hooked up to monitors but awake. "You scared me," she said, half angry, half relieved. He chuckled weakly. "Didn't mean to. Guess my heart just needed a tune-up." For the next week, she visited daily, reading to him, making sure the nurses were kind, and sneaking in his favorite oatmeal cookies. When he was discharged, she drove him home and tucked him into bed. He caught her hand before she could leave. "Emily," he said, eyes bright despite his frailty, "you've been more to me than anyone these past few years. Remember that." She smiled softly. "Get some rest, Mr. W. We'll talk tomorrow." But the next morning, as she was folding laundry in his living room, a black car pulled up outside. The sound of doors opening made her look up, and what she saw froze her in place. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, followed by 2 women holding briefcases. They moved with an air of precision that didn't belong on this quiet street. One of the women, tall, poised, and serious, approached the door and knocked. Emily opened it cautiously. "Can I help you?" The woman handed her a business card. "Margaret Hale, attorney at law. We're here to see Mr. Whitaker," she said. "He requested our presence today." "Mr. Whitaker," Emily echoed, confused. "He's resting, I don't think." Before she could finish, Harold's voice came from the hallway. "It's all right, Emily. Let them in." He was dressed neatly, in a sweater and pressed slacks, his usual shakiness replaced by a strange calm. The bodyguard stepped aside as the lawyers entered and arranged themselves in a semicircle around his armchair. "What's happening?" Emily asked, standing awkwardly by the couch. Harold gestured for her to sit. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Ms. Hale opened a folder and began reading aloud. "Mr. Harold Whitaker, being of sound mind, has requested the execution of his revised will and estate plan. Witnesses are present." Emily blinked. "Your will, Mr. W. Why now?" He looked at her with watery eyes. "Because I finally have someone to leave it to." The words hit her like a gust of wind. She shook her head. No, that's not. I don't need." He raised a hand. "Please, let me finish." Ms. Hale continued reading, her voice even. "The entirety of Mr. Whitaker's estate, including the house, the remaining business assets, and all liquid funds, are to be transferred to Ms. Emily Foster upon his passing. Emily felt her throat tighten. Mr. Whitaker, I can't accept this. I was just helping you. You were the only one who did, he said quietly. I've had money all my life, Emily, but never kindness. You gave me that. You reminded me I wasn't invisible. Tears welled in her eyes. But why the bodyguards? The lawyers? He smiled faintly. Because some people won't like what I'm doing. My late brother's sons think they're entitled to everything. They've never visited me once, but they're waiting for me to die. I wanted to make sure this was protected. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock. Then Emily stood and went to his side. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. I know, he said. That's why I wanted to. He signed the papers with a trembling hand, and Ms. Hale notarized them. The lawyers packed up their folders, the guards stepped outside, and the black car drove away as quietly as it had come. Emily sat beside him afterward, still stunned. What am I supposed to do with all of this? Live, he said simply. Fix the house. Go back to school. Find someone who loves you the way Clara loved me. And when you do, don't waste time being afraid to care. She leaned over and hugged him, gently, because he was fragile, but firmly enough that he could feel her gratitude. 3 weeks later, Mr. Whitaker passed away peacefully in his sleep. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Emily stayed, not because of the inheritance, but because it felt like home. Every morning at 7:30, she still made oatmeal for two, setting one bowl across the table from her. And though the chair remained empty, she always said softly, "Morning, Mr. W." And somehow, in the faint creak of the old wood and the whisper of the curtains, she almost heard him answer back. Every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m., Emily Foster stopped by the small brick house at the corner of Pine and Willow Street. The ivy on its walls had turned from green to brown, and the porch creaked with every step. Inside lived Mr. Harold Whitaker, a quiet, stooped man of 87 who rarely spoke to anyone but her. She hadn't planned on becoming part of his life. 2 winters earlier, she noticed his lights hadn't been on for 2 days straight. Worried, she knocked on his door and found him shivering inside, too weak to reach the phone. She brought him soup that night, then groceries the next, and before long, she became a daily visitor. At first, he tried to push her away. I don't need help, he'd mutter from his armchair. Emily would smile. You don't, but your fridge does. She was 26, juggling a waitressing job and community college, but somehow she always found time for Mr. Whitaker. He had no children, no visitors, and barely any friends left. She'd read him the newspaper, make him tea, and listen as he talked about his younger days. He'd once owned a small furniture company and built every table, chair, and shelf in his home by hand. His late wife, Clara, was still the love of his life. Her photo sat above the fireplace, a smiling woman with soft curls and bright eyes. She kept this place warm, he'd say. Now it's just drafts and dust. Emily never pitied him, she just cared. Maybe because she understood loss too well. Her mother had died 2 years earlier, and her father had disappeared long before that. Helping Harold made the house she lived in feel less empty. Their days fell into a rhythm. Tea at 10, a short walk at noon, reading until dusk. Sometimes, when he grew tired, he'd close his eyes and say, "You're a good girl, Emily. The world needs more people like you." She'd laugh. "The world needs more people who let me cook for them." Then one Friday morning, everything changed. When Emily arrived, the house was quiet. No clinking cup, no soft radio music. She called out his name, but only silence answered. On the kitchen table lay a note written in shaky pen. Greater than at the hospital. Don't worry. Back soon. Her heart sank. She rushed to St. Mary's Hospital and found him in a white bed, tubes in his arm, his face pale but peaceful. "You didn't tell me you were sick," she said. "Didn't want to bother you," he replied, smiling faintly. She visited every day that week, bringing crossword puzzles and his favorite oatmeal cookies. When he was finally discharged, she drove him home, helped him into bed, and tucked the blanket around him. He took her hand and said quietly, "Emily, promise me you'll come by tomorrow. There's something important I need to do." She nodded, thinking nothing of it. But when she returned the next morning, a black car was parked outside. 4 men in suits stepped out, followed by 2 women carrying briefcases. One of them approached the door and said, "We're here for Mr. Whitaker." And that's when everything she thought she knew about him began to unravel. Part 2. The secret and the will. Emily froze as the suited strangers entered the tiny living room. Their polished shoes looked wildly out of place on the worn carpet. The tall woman in front introduced herself as Margaret Hale, attorney at law. Mr. Whitaker requested our presence today, she said firmly. We're here to finalize his will. His will, Emily echoed, startled. He didn't say anything about. Before she could finish, Mr. Whitaker's voice came from the hallway. It's all right, Emily. Let them in. He was dressed neatly, sweater pressed, hair combed, and there was a strange calm in his eyes, like a man who had made peace with everything. The lawyers arranged themselves in a semicircle around his chair while the 4 bodyguards remained by the door. Emily hovered nearby, unsure what to do. Harold, Ms. Hale said, opening a folder, are you certain you wish to proceed with this distribution of assets? I am, he said. I've had enough time to think. Emily frowned. Mr. Whitaker, what's going on? He smiled gently. You'll find out soon, kiddo. Just listen. Ms. Hale began reading. I, Harold Whitaker, being of sound mind, hereby declare this my final will and testament. I leave the entirety of my estate, including property, savings, and business interests, to Ms. Emily Foster. The words didn't register at first. When they did, Emily's breath caught. What? No, Mr. Whitaker, you can't do that. I didn't help you for. He raised a trembling hand. I know you didn't. That's exactly why I am. Tears stung her eyes. You have family. They never visit. Not once in 20 years, he said, voice firm. They're waiting for me to die so they can fight over scraps. You brought me soup. You talked to me. You made me laugh. I'm not leaving my life's work to people who forgot I exist. Ms. Hale had paused to let him speak, then continued the legal formalities. When it was time, Mr. Whitaker signed the documents with a shaking hand. The lawyers witnessed it, sealed the papers, and quietly left. The bodyguards followed them out. The house was silent again. Emily sat beside him, speechless. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then don't say anything, he said softly. Just promise me you'll use it well. Fix this old house. Finish school. Live a life that would make Clara proud, and me, too. She leaned forward and hugged him, feeling his frail frame tremble against her shoulder. 3 weeks later, Mr. Whitaker passed away peacefully in his sleep. The lawyers returned, this time without the bodyguards, and handed Emily the keys. The house was hers now, every book, every creaky floorboard, every handmade chair. She didn't sell it. Instead, she turned it into Whitaker's home, a small community center for lonely seniors, the kind of place Harold himself would have loved. Every morning at 7:30, Emily still made oatmeal for 2. She'd set one bowl across from her own and say softly, "Morning, Mr. W." And in the quiet hum of the old house, she sometimes swore she heard him whisper back, "Good morning, kiddo."